the culture of crypto has basically created game studios that from the get-go focus on collaboration, focus on distributed ownership. It brings power back to the players instead of it all being kind of concentrated with the game publisher.
Welcome back to another episode of the Wolf Podcast, of course, the world of learning finance. I am your host, Gav Blacksberg, also known as Wolf_Financial on Twitter, where you can find me on any given day hosting a number of Twitter spaces. Today, I'm excited to welcome none other than Bored Elon Musk to the pod, at Bored Elon Musk from Twitter. I love the first start to your Twitter bio. It's fortune favors the bold. And when people come to this, they find out that you are a hyper parody, not just any parody out here, but a hyper parody, and in fact, an electronic hyper parody. You're often on the timeline talking about gaming, talking a little bit about Elon, talking about things you wish were invented. And of course, you have a large audience to speak to with 1.7 million followers who I'm sure are always tuning in and listening. So let's pull back the curtains a little bit first and welcome you to the pod. And with that, I would love to get a little bit of an introduction from yourself as to, I know that there's an anon component here, but as much as you can tell us, what's your professional background, a little bit more about yourself and how you got into this position, and we could take it from there.
Well, first of all, quick edit. It's fortune favors the board versus
the board.
bold.
Yes. Did I say bold?
You did. No, but that of course is the original expression that I modified. I've liked this idea of rebranding the word bored and boredom. It's often got a connotation of negativity, but I think in today's world where we're super connected, always online, always doing stuff, boredom is important because that is what often leads to creative ideas and problem solving and just a little bit of a break for your brain. By the way, quick mention, I never knew what WOLF stood for, the acronym, so now thank you for providing that explanation as an avid fan of yours. So yeah, just to dive into it, in terms of the real human meat bag behind Bored Elon Musk on Twitter. So Bored has existed now for 9 years. I just had my Twitter anniversary a few days ago, which is a relatively long time on Twitter, especially for like a pseudonymous account. The real world person that I talk about in third person is a individual who does love gaming, is a game creator who worked in I guess you could call it corporate America in the video games business for quite a long time, and really never kind of focused on Bored Elon Musk as like a primary identifier. Only in the last year or so did I sort of migrate most of my online time from the real world, person that I am to Bored Elon Musk. And that is because, basically the distribution that I've built up over time has led me to a lot of interesting opportunities from a partnership standpoint, a career standpoint, a business building standpoint. But yeah, to backtrack a little bit, I've always been somebody who's interested in creative writing and experimenting online. And so Bored Elon Musk was probably the 10th iteration of me attempting to create a parody account. For those who aren't familiar, Twitter is pretty rife with parody accounts. It's creating this character that riffs off a real person or a funny event or something like that. And I think as a writer you need constraints. You can't just like stare at a blank page. You need lines to color inside of. And so the idea of a parody account always for me was a good constraint from the perspective of like comedic writing. And flash backwards to 9 years ago. I'm a fan of Elon Musk. He's putting really wild ideas and real products into the world, and he inspired me just to sort of create this character of like him when he's bored, which is probably not that frequent because obviously he's a very busy guy with a lot of different companies to manage. But I put it out there. I sent out a few tweets of just ideas he might come up with when he's in the shower or taking a walk. And it really resonated with a lot of people in the tech space and in Silicon Valley. And it kind of just blew up from there. And I think the consistency of just doing that for many, many years is what led me to grow in visibility. I will note that for like the last 3 years or so, my sort of distribution, my following has kind of like flatlined. I think once you reach a certain level on Twitter, it's hard to grow. And as you alluded to, I've kind of shifted focus from being this one-dimensional character and being more of a well-versed, identity that talks about a lot of different things and talks about a lot of things that I want to talk about, the person behind the account, not necessarily like what people want this character to be. But either way, I've enjoyed that transition because it's made Twitter more fun for me. It's opened up a lot more doors for me. And I like to sort of be in this hybrid reality of, juggling kind of two personas, the real world ID and this anonymous ID, that, provides me with a lot of joy and hopefully entertains other people as well.
Very interesting. What was if you could kind of walk me through a little bit over time, when did most of that account growth happen?
It probably happened in year 3 and 4. So it was a lot of just kind of grinding away and putting out content in the first few years. Did get some nice spikes because of getting noticed by, well followed individuals in Silicon Valley. And then I think, year 3 or 4, real Elon Musk gave me a few shout outs, so that didn't hurt as well. And part of it, I think, also was, his growth, his personal sort of spotlight grown tremendously over the last 9 years as well. So at the time, when I started the account, obviously like Elon Musk was a known quantity, but nowhere to the degree he is today. And I think that I just happened to pick a real person to parody that, was a very good choice because obviously like he's, arguably the most famous Twitter user on Earth right now. So that was a bit of dumb luck, I guess you could say. But yeah, the middle of the account's life was really where it grew. And I think that, as I grew in the distribution, I really held back on trying to monetize it. I think, people who get a large following count on any social platform sometimes rush to try to monetize it through like partnerships or promotions or whatever. I never really wanted to do that. I wanted to make sure I built a reputation and, sort of behind the scenes friends and trust, and didn't really want to cheapen the account, and that when I was going to sort of use it from a monetary standpoint, that I did so around something that I was passionate about and that, felt somewhat on brand. So I'd say that until about year 7 or 8, I really never monetized the Bored Elon account in any way.
How did you begin monetizing it? Was it mostly through marketing your own products?
Yeah, I mean, it was mostly that, and just like, I think after a bunch of time proving my ability to sort of think in public and also drive attention, it turned into investment opportunities or advisory opportunities. So, I never was really interested in this idea of like, hey, we're going to pay you X amount of money for you to tweet about something. I don't do that. But I have selectively become an advisor for projects that I believe in, or I've had the opportunity to angel invest in them. And so, if there are companies that I believe in and I talk about them, that does indirectly help me monetize. That's really been the path forward. And then, Boardbox, which we can talk about later, was sort of the first direct way of monetizing my my following, and that was very much helped with the growth of crypto and in particular NFTs.
Let's talk for another second here about Elon. You mentioned that he had given you a couple of shout outs. What have those interactions been like? Have you ever been in the DMs or emails with him? It seems like you've obviously been following him for a long time.
They've been pretty light interactions, I would say, at best. No direct conversations. Doesn't even follow me, but he has sort of tweeted a few times about the account. One of my favorites was when he basically stated something to the effect of like, Bored Elon Musk is actually his troll account, like secretly. Right. And he was being sarcastic, but not everybody understood that. So there is still a cohort of individuals who believe that real Elon runs my account, even though I've been sharing my real voice for several years now, and clearly I don't sound like him.
How important is it to you to be anonymous?
It's pretty important philosophically, but for different reasons than I think most other anonymous or pseudonymous accounts have. I am definitely an advocate for the right to privacy. But for me, it's more of a branding thing. I find that, Bored Elon Musk is a fun, lighthearted character. People are able to sort of project their own thoughts and opinions onto Bored Elon. So I think that illusion is important, and that you break that illusion once you sort of know the real person behind it. Even, I was even hesitant, honestly, to do voice interviews and chats for a very long time because I didn't want to sort of break this like character that I had built. But ultimately, I found that the positives overcome the negatives. But yeah, I mean, for me, I think it's a nice thing to have because if you are in a particular industry, if you are trying to experiment at things that people don't know you for, having anonymity helps you. It gives you a shield. It lets you be more creative. It prevents you from having fears of looking stupid in public. It prevents you from having issues with maybe an employer or family or whoever. So I think there's a lot of value to it. And the reality is that most of the things we talk about online, especially, don't really require your real government ID to be attached to it. Like if I know a lot about video games, I can explain all of my knowledge to you and have a conversation with you without you knowing where I was born or where I went to school. If I can talk the talk and I know, and it sounds like I'm credible on the subject, that should be enough. So I think that, what I'm trying to do on my end is show people they can kind of segment their identities. They don't have to bring their full selves to every conversation or every profile that they have online. And for me, I'm actively trying to protect the magic of Bored Elon's secret identity. At some point, it'll probably get revealed, but I've done a pretty good job for 9 years keeping it a secret. And I think that, to be honest, like people see me as a nice person and as an honest person, and that has prevented many from trying to dox me because they're just like, yeah, he's cool. We'll leave him alone. We're not gonna like try to pull that thread and see if we can figure it out just to be jerks.
Yeah, because there are some Elon haters out there.
Yeah,
So,
I mean, of the real Elon, sure, certainly. I think that most sane people understand that I'm not that person. And
yeah.
personally speaking, when you look back at Elon Musk and his life and what he's accomplished, I would say that quantifiably he's offered a lot more positive things to the world than negative. He's got a lot more to do, so we'll see where kind of the chips fall at the end of his life. But I'm a fan.
One more question on the account. How do you come up with your content? Is it mostly just thoughts that you're having? Do you sit down and write content weekly?
Oh man, I wish that I was like more methodical about it, where I had like writing time and all that. To be honest, if I was more consistent about it, I probably would have far more content and higher quality content. But it's all off the cuff. It's just I see things, they inspire me, and I tweet them out, and that's the reality of it. There is no method to this madness at all.
Okay, perfect. So we talked a little bit here about Boardbox and what you're doing there. I guess we'll just open it up with a little bit of, what is Boardbox? Why are you building in the gaming space? And then we can deep dive into a few different areas within that.
Right. So I will. I think it's helpful to just kind of look at gaming and the industry at a high level before jumping into the specifics of Boardbox. But people who grew up in the 80s and the 90s and afterwards, there was a really simple kind of system for video games, right? Like you had a console or a computer. You go to the store, you buy a cartridge or a CD, like a physical piece of media, and then you play that game. And then you're done, right? Like that was kind of the model. And maybe if you wanted to, you could take that game and sell it to a friend or sell it to GameStop or a store that would basically buy it used. That sort of evolved later to digital downloads. Like you could, instead of buying a physical game and playing it on your machine, you could just download it and you owned that digital file. And in a way, that digital file was kind of like the NFTs of today, right? Like you didn't have a thing that you could look at. You had this digital copy or instance of a thing that you could use. That also, in tandem with that, people were also able to buy other things that were digital in the game, right? So it wasn't just like the actual file or the core game itself that were digital that people were buying. They were buying stuff inside the game, like weapons or skins or vehicles and DLC, downloadable content. And so that all progressed. It was great for game publishers because it's expensive to like print physical media and ship it to stores and have to stock it and do all these things. Instead, you could just have somebody pay the same price for a game and then have it, go directly as a file to someone's machine. And you could do that an infinite amount of times. It's a wonderful system. It's terrible for GameStop and Walmart, but great for the game publisher. But ultimately, all these digital assets that you had in a game, you didn't own them the same way you own a watch or a car or a piece of clothing. You basically just have the right to kind of use it in that game. And the publisher would always have the right to ban you or prevent you from selling that stuff to a friend. Like if I downloaded a copy of a game, I can't sell that copy of that digital instance to a friend. So that's all the sort of backdrop to what led to BoardBox, which is you have a growing vertical within gaming, which is often referred to as blockchain gaming or PlayFi. And the whole idea there is you buy stuff in video games and you own that stuff. And by own means that you can trade it, you can sell it, you can do other things with it, and you can basically use those things outside of the game. There can be marketplaces for that stuff outside of the video game. Now, you still need the game itself, right, to actually use that stuff. It doesn't sort of exist unless there is a game to play it in. But what's happened is you have this cultural shift happening in the video games industry where players are getting more power to actually own their digital assets the same way that they would own physical assets. And so this is growing. I'm very bullish on it. I have been working in the video games industry for a very long time. I've seen the shift in the industry and how the business models have adjusted. And I do truly believe that blockchain gaming is going to be a very large and important element of the video games industry. So with BoardBox, I've built a company that's really focused on curating what those great games are. A lot of people don't necessarily have the knowledge or the time to find games that they should be considering or they should consider playing. And so what we've done is we've built a product that basically packages up blockchain game assets so people can discover new games. And then we put out a steady stream of content that, brings together people and informs them of games that they should be considering. So you could kind of argue that BoardBox is partially a media company and partially this boutique retail operation, if that makes sense.
Are there ways for me to come in and be like, hey, I've played this traditional game. What's the comp for it in a Web3 NFT world and have games suggested to me?
That's a great feature. I think that is something that we absolutely will do. It's a matter of the library of games being bigger. The reality is I don't think that there's more than 20 playable blockchain games right now. We're building this business very, very early, and that's competing with every major traditional platform like Xbox and PlayStation and Nintendo Switch and Epic Game Store and Steam, where literally there's hundreds of thousands of games to pick from. So with every new launch of a game platform or a console, it starts off small. There's 3 games, there's 5 games, then there's 100, then there's 10,000. We're in the early innings, basically, of blockchain gaming. So fast forward to 2023, 2024, I think we're gonna have thousands of games that are playable, and then a recommendation system like you've suggested, 100% we could implement onto the BoardBox website. But the inventory basically isn't there. So right now we're really focusing on just kind of hand curation and making recommendations based on what games are out there, and also just kind of flagging what games are coming in the next 6 to 12 months so people can put them on their radar and potentially buy up game assets before the games are ready as a means to financially fuel projects that they're interested in.
Okay, 2 questions on that. First, when you say buy up assets, how exactly is that working? And is there a wallet that they're connecting into the BoardBox ecosystem and then things are owned inside of that? How exactly does it work?
So with BoardBox, we're negotiating with game studios to buy a large volume of game assets ahead of time and deliver them to box holders. So really simply, BoardBox is a container of game assets that were created for blockchain games. So normally a blockchain game would, set up a mint. They would mint game assets to a particular set of people, and those people would hold those game assets in their wallet. So if it's an Ethereum based game, for example, they could see those assets in their MetaMask wallet, or if it's a Solana based game, they would have it in a Phantom wallet. So we're not really messing with that dynamic too much. It's just that we are packaging up those game assets that ultimately will be delivered to players, and once they buy the BoardBox, they can then open it, quote unquote, claim the assets from the games that we've recommended, and then those game assets will be delivered to their wallets, and then it's forever owned by them. And those game assets are part of the game studio's collections. They don't need to use Boardbox in any way to interact with the game. We are simply a delivery mechanism and a recommendation mechanism.
Does buying Boardbox give you access to all these games, or are they basically included in the price?
So most of the games that we recommend with Boardbox, people don't have to buy, game items or NFTs to participate. A lot of them are just accessible to play, regardless. It's an option basically to own items that, might come with certain privileges, or stake in the game. But generally speaking, no, you don't need these items, that we provide via Boardbox to play the games. What we're doing is introducing unique items to people that would be useful in the games we're recommending, but they are optional. They are not musts. And so you don't need the Boardbox in any way to play the games we're recommending. And I think that's important because we're selling a premium item. It's not inexpensive, so everyone can participate or benefit from Boardbox in the sense that they can see what we're recommending and go check out those games. If they have some money to spend and they want to be sort of in the premium group that we're creating, and they want to buy the assets that we're curating for them, that's great. That's an option. So we're kind of catering to the luxury market within video games right now. And over time, as we get bigger and the market expands, we hope to make our price points more accessible and increase the size of our community.
So right now the Boardbox goes for 1 ETH, and you've sold around 600 of those, right?
Yeah, and we launched our product the day Terra collapsed. So pretty happy in the midst of a tough market, that we were able to sell a very premium item at that rate. And we've got 400 left, and we're not on any kind of timeline. We're going to sell those boxes, and it'll take as long as it takes. Ultimately, our game partners worked really hard to build their product, and we don't want to look at discounting or giveaways just to kind of move our inventory. Sometimes in the space of NFTs, people get overly concerned about how fast things sell out, but we're not a hype-driven product. We're very clearly a business that focuses on delivering good games to people, and if we sell out 6 months from now, that's completely fine. We want to focus on delivering our boxes to people who want to own these game items and play games, not on flippers who are worried about things like floor prices and reselling our boxes to other people.
How do you decide which games make the cut?
It's a lot of sort of art versus science at this point. So just a lot of the time that I spent in the video game industry, I'm biased, but I think made me pretty good at sniffing out teams that are going to be able to bring a game to market, what games are going to be sustainable, which ones are going to perform well. So we meet with all of our game partners regularly, and sort of go through the cycle of understanding when are they going to release, what type of game is it, who is the team behind it, what have they created before. For the first box, we met with about 100 game studios before we narrowed it down to the 5 that ultimately went into the box. And there are a variety of factors. It's not just about quality. I mean, it comes down to what games are available today, making sure the genres are varied. So ultimately, a lot of my time is spent meeting with game studios all day long, just talking to different game studios, hearing about what they're building, and also just getting a sense for their willingness to work with us, right? If there are 2 game studios that are considering working with Boardbox and one wants to offer something that's a little bit more special to our community, we'll probably lean towards them, all things being equal. And then, sort of that's the art part of it, and the science part of it is we certainly track, the size of their community, the engagement metrics, in the game if the game is live, just understanding how often are people playing, how many concurrent players are they seeing. So it's a little bit of a variety there. I think as the market grows and there are more and more games in the market, our job will become harder because there's more and more to curate, and so that's where we will need to lean more on our sort of inbound and driving game studios to want to work with us so that we can more efficiently, weed through games that we would want to consider including in the box.
Got it. Right. Are right now most of the games in a similar genre, perhaps, or is it really spanning? Because, for example, we've done spaces with Block Lords, which is a much more, I would say, expansive game, right? Where you're actually like going out on quests and stuff, versus some where, you know, you can have really simple games, right? Where it's just a, you know, like a Tetris style interface or whatever it is, right? There can be a lot of range here. I'm just curious if there are certain genres that you're leaning towards.
We definitely try to keep a variety of genres. I think that in a perfect world, every box is going to have 5 games from 5 different types of genres. So kind of thinking through the first box, you know, we looked at the racing genre, the strategy genre, first-person shooter. You know, you want to give people like a box that doesn't have like 5 of the same exact type of game. I think in terms of scale, that's a different question. The reality is a lot of blockchain game studios started building last summer. Most kind of large scale games take 2 years or 3 years to develop. So you're probably seeing a lot of similar scale games right now because those were the ones that basically could like bring a game to market in 6 months, or frankly reskin a game they were already building that they happened to just kind of like tack blockchain onto. But yeah, I think by 2024 you're going to be seeing games that are on chain that are competing with the same quality and scale of games that you would see on a Nintendo Switch or a PS5.
Why is Web3 technology a ideal fit for gaming?
I would not say that it's an ideal or a must. I think it's a nice to have. You know, I think there's a lot of people who are in the space with me who really enjoy blockchain gaming or the theory behind it that are basically saying like, this is the future, this is the only way it's going to work. I'm not that guy. I'm not the blockchain gaming maxi, even though I run a company that absolutely focuses on it. I think that it's a bit of a cultural shift that's happening in gaming. Like right now, if you asked Activision or you know, Electronic Arts to basically change everything about how they run their systems in their games and like let players like trade assets and sell to each other and do it all via the existing system that they already have built with their own servers, they could do it technically speaking, but philosophically, culturally, legally speaking, that's where they would run into a lot of challenges. And so I think that the culture of crypto has basically created game studios that from the get-go focus on collaboration, focus on distributed ownership, focus on, you know, interoperability, and so it's done very efficiently via crypto, via blockchain. But it's not a must. I'm not going to be that guy who says that. But I do think that there's something to be said about you know, things happening in public, like things on the blockchain are public, they are trackable, they are immutable, they're easy to, you know, sort of not dispute, versus a game that makes decisions in a very centralized way where certain players are banned or certain characters are eliminated. Like that's all done very kind of behind the scenes these days. So I think the reason that people really love this idea of games on chain is that it brings power back to the players instead of it all being kind of concentrated with the game publisher.
Got it. You've been in this industry for a decade plus at this point, perhaps even 2 decades. How do you think gaming is going to change over the next 5 to 10 years?
I think that what you're already seeing is the shift away from just straight up buying games at a certain price point, and instead like free to play has become more and more the norm. And games basically monetize through, you know, in-app purchases and downloadable content and sort of aesthetic opportunities. That trend will continue, absolutely. I think one big shift that you'll probably see that will give more accessibility to gamers is not requiring people to buy these really expensive consoles or computers, but rather be able to play any video game of any quality in their browser with the game itself running on a server somewhere else. Services like Google Stadia, Amazon have experimented with this, Microsoft is doing it as well. And that's really important, right? Because not everyone can afford a $600 video game console or a $1,500 PC. You know, the mobile phone made gaming a lot more accessible. In browser gaming is going to further that. And then, like, I think looking further into the future, in a smaller way, I think that like augmented reality is going to become really important. A lot of people are betting on this idea of virtual reality and sort of putting on these goggles and having this immersive experience. I'm not personally sold on that because I think the barrier of entry is still very high. But augmented reality, the idea of sort of like, taking your phone with you into the real world and having a gamified experience, I think that is absolutely underexplored arena, with a few examples like Pokemon Go, having some success. But I think that's going to be an absolutely huge area for video games to expand. Yeah, those are some initial thoughts about the future of gaming, and I think that as a final thought, I would say, and this is very much self-serving, but I think curation in gaming is going to be needed, because the reality is that there's so many video games to play today, and they're not just like games that you play once and you're done. They're games that are constantly updated, right? So like Fortnite and Fall Guys and Call of Duty, these games are getting constantly updated. New seasons are being added, new content is being added, and so every game is not only competing with every game that existed before it, but it's competing with every game that existed before it, and that game is being updated. So there's a lack of attention, and there's a really difficult time for game publishers to kind of stand out. So I think anyone who's kind of acting as a curator and highlighting games that people should be playing, and we're trying to be that, is going to be very useful for people who are just overwhelmed with the amount of entertainment in gaming that exists.
Speaking about the AR side of things, that's exactly what we discussed on our space this past Monday, the one I asked you about on the Metaverse one for 7 p.m. And what we were talking about specifically was a conversation around how really AR is going to probably be that big next step, and it's going to really happen once we get to the point where it's almost like AirPods, right? 5-10 years ago, you see people walking around with like these in their ears. Probably 10 years ago, you'd be like, what are you doing? Like, that is the weirdest thing. That looks ridiculous. But now it's norm, right? They removed the headphone jack. And we were saying, it kind of has to get to the point where like Apple's creating, AR goggles, and it's weird if you don't have them, right? Like, they're the in for business, for everything. And that's when we can kind of make some of these transitions to really having AR as a component.
Yeah, I mean, I certainly would love to be able to enjoy these types of experiences and be outside, not be stuck in like, a dark basement with a giant screen in front of me or a goggle strapped to my face. Like, I would love to walk through a forest and that to be gamified, where I'm enjoying nature, I'm enjoying the fresh air, I'm getting exercise, but also I'm playing a game at the same time.
Absolutely. Would you say your main goal now with Twitter and your Twitter account is focused around Boardbox, or are there other goals you have for it?
Oh, I don't have any goals. I just wing it. It's like asking just a person who has a Twitter account for their own name, like what's the goals for your account. I mean, I'm really not that methodical about it. I certainly want to use my Twitter account to to grow Boardbox and also entertain other people and myself. I think one of the coolest things over the last 2 years, especially as I've been like doing more voice chats and stuff, is honestly the relationships and the conversations I've had off Twitter, right? Like the direct messages and the emails and the phone calls. It's been a really good way to have an in with interesting people, right? So I'll put it this way, like somebody who I admire would probably not have a conversation with like the real world me if I emailed them randomly wanting to talk. But if Bored Elon reaches out to them and they're like, oh, this guy has 1.7 million followers, I'll give him a shot. And so that's the in. And then when we have the conversation, generally speaking, they find that I'm interesting and nice, and they want to have that relationship with me. So I guess, like, to answer your question, if I think about it a little bit more, if I can continue to leverage this account to build stronger and more robust real world relationships with people I admire, that's a win. And I'm happy with that being sort of the focus of this account for the rest of my life.
Do you shoot your shot a lot?
Yeah, I do. I'd say at least once a day. And I usually have a pretty strong conversion rate.
What goes into that initial DM?
So, if they follow me, it's pretty easy. It's like, hey, I'm working on stuff, you're working on stuff, let's take time to chat. And I'd say like 90% of the time it works. If it's somebody I can't reach directly, I can almost certainly find another person that already I am connected with who can make the introduction. So 2 degrees of separation, I would say, to basically anybody on Earth is where I'm at these days. So yeah, I've gotten pretty good at networking, but I have a very strong, set of ammo with the Bored Elon account that helps me get the ins. And the more sort of like the more the person is kind of like not in this space in social media in Web3, the funnier the conversation is, because if it's somebody who works like, who's very much like rooted in the real world, quote unquote, I have to kind of always start the conversation with like, yeah, I'm a pseudonymous account. I don't really like share my identity. It's kind of this caricature. And, that takes the first 2-3 minutes of the call. And then they get over it really quickly, and we talk about what we want to talk about. And when they hear my voice, they know I'm a real person, not some, shadowy supercoder who doesn't want to reveal anything
Yeah,
about themselves.
very fair. What's your favorite Web3 or blockchain based game right now? What are you playing the most of?
Funny enough, I'm going to be talking to them later today, playing a lot of EV.io. It's a really simple to get into first person shooter. It runs in browser. It's just like get a bunch of friends, jump into their site, and you can start playing a game immediately. So that's probably where I'm spending the most of my time from a blockchain gaming standpoint as of this week. And I still love, traditional video games as well. I play a lot of Rocket League, and lately I've gotten back into a game called Mario times Rabbids, which is a lovely little strategy game. So I try to dedicate at least an hour a day to gaming if I can.
I'm a big Overwatch guy.
Nice.
It's still got my heart. So hasn't gone anywhere. Okay, just a couple other questions I was curious about. I've seen you tweet several times. I wish that this invention was created, or somebody should do this. I'm curious. Elon likely is going to have to buy Twitter. Wants to make some changes. I'm sure maybe if you've thought around it, whether sarcastic or not, with your tweets, some changes that could be made. You've been on Twitter a long time. What's one, or if you want to give me a few features that you think could be added to Twitter, and then maybe any ways that Twitter could be gamified to make it better or have Web3 components?
Oh man, I've had so many thoughts over the years about how to improve Twitter. I think that just giving, I think
Shut it
primarily,
down.
yeah, like if Elon doesn't buy Twitter, maybe I'll come in with a second bid, like a lower bid, and they'll accept the offer. But I think primarily just giving users more tools to control their content feed is really important. Everybody kind of understands that you can like let the Twitter algorithm feed you information, or you can like go chronological, but even that doesn't quite work. I think that giving people stronger tools to filter for certain topics, for certain words, to focus on individuals that they want to follow more easily. It's all very clunky right now, and I find that like I have to work really hard to just see the content that I want to see from people I've already opted to follow. On the flip side, and again, super self-serving here, but like I'm a little salty that I built up this large distribution, and that not everybody who wants to follow my content can see it, because somehow whatever I do on Twitter seems to not optimize well against the Twitter algorithm. I guess that's a little like I don't know, arrogance on my part. Maybe I'm just not interesting anymore and nobody cares. But I feel like what's happened is that there have been sort of these like backroom decisions that were made at Twitter about like what content works well on Twitter and what doesn't, and that's not something that the users are aware of. And so like I feel like people don't change very much in terms of their content, but then a switch gets flipped at Twitter, and all of a sudden they're not getting the engagement they used to, which it's not really like an ego thing. It's like you're just not reaching the people who have agreed to like be in a relationship with you online. So it's that's something that I've continued to be a little salty about, and I'd like to see that change. And if real Elon takes over, I'm sure he'll help with that.
So, like an open source algorithm?
Yeah, like give people a few sort of default templates for like this is the type of algorithm I would like my feed to work off of, and let developers build ones themselves that they can either sell to others, or let people use. Like back in the day, in the early days of Twitter, Twitter let like developers and encourage developers to build all sorts of stuff on top of it.
Right.
And then they kind of shut all of that down, unfortunately. They wanted to control the full experience. I think they need to go back to the day of like having an SDK, and like letting developers build cool stuff for others to use. I'd like to see them return to that. I have a feeling that Jack Dorsey wanted that to happen. He is now no longer focused on Twitter. So whoever the new owner of Twitter is, I'd like to see them return to their roots. And I do think that will help actually boost the user base of Twitter, and ultimately help them with their their revenue goals.
Yeah, I think those are some good points. I think Elon did mention wanting to have an open source algorithm. There's a lot of confusing parts to the algorithm right now, for sure. There's also a lot of ways that Twitter, what always mind boggles me about Twitter is billions of dollars of business are done on Twitter. I would probably say like weekly, if not daily. There's so much money that moves through, whether it's for marketing, for retweets, for something else, and Twitter gets none of it. Zero. And surprisingly, they really haven't tried to build any tools to actually assist in the monetization that would allow them to take a cut. They made super follows, which are basically the internet version of pay me and I'll be nice to you. And there's just not a lot out there. Do you see any other ways they could work stuff in?
I mean, I definitely agree with you that they are not tapping into the money that is flowing all around them between the lines of what Twitter is able to control. They're hyper-focused still on the ad model, and the traditional ad model is dying. So I think that they could create more tools that would facilitate commerce on their platform that they could then take a cut of. I mean, kind of going back to video games, it's like the reason video games, create new content and skins and all these things is because people like to, look cool online, and they will pay for that privilege. And so, Twitter explored some of these things with like the NFT skins and all that, but I don't think they're doing it at a rapid enough clip. And I think there's a big opportunity to kind of focus on like giving people the status that they're eagerly looking for and charging them for it, instead of trying to optimize this platform for serving ads to people who are increasingly not paying attention to them or not even seeing them in the first place.
Got it. Okay, that all makes sense. Really love everything we've gone over. This was super helpful for me to learn more as well about the Web3 and gaming. I knew a good amount of what you were doing at Boardbox. We talked about it on Spaces, but I think for more people to learn, because it's the first place that I've seen really this creation and curation of games happening in the same spot, where I'm pretty sure you've worked on some of your own stuff, you've brought in others, you're clearly kind of becoming a central hub. And it makes sense, right? Because something like a Steam, like an Xbox, like you said, there's just hundreds of thousands, but this is a whole new genre in reality. For people that are listening to this pod, would love to give them some type of call to action. Is the best place to direct people right towards the Boardbox, right towards their Twitter?
Yeah, that would be great. We're boardbox_ on Twitter, boardbox.io. And of course, if gaming's not your jam, I'm bored Elon Musk on Twitter and occasionally say interesting or funny things, and always appreciate a follow.
Love it, love it. Yeah, definitely everyone should go ahead and check it out. Board's also very gracious with his follows towards others. You followed a bunch, which always makes people feel good. I'm sure they get that big follow account.
Love to reciprocate.
Yes, we'd love to see it. It's really, really nice. Awesome. Well, I really appreciate the time today. This was super cool. I'm diving way further into this industry. I'm doing like 2 to 3 gaming spaces a week now that are focused around Web3, around different ideas with that. So I'm just trying to be a sponge and absorb and just ask as many questions as possible. Really appreciate your time and hope you have a great rest of your week and everything you're doing, and looking forward to seeing what Boardbox accomplishes.